This is the place where Pigeon Brook meets Biscuit Creek. This is the gravel road that leads back to main camp. This is Frost Valley, a 5,000-acre camp in the southern Catskills in New York State. One of America's oldest and largest summer camps. It's large by its physical size and large by its capacity. It can fit over 800 campers and several hundred staff. By upstate New York standards, it's a small city. In the middle of a large field stands a single towering sugar maple. This old tree is a physical landmark and a living symbol for Frost Valley. The tree is called Big Tree. The field is called Big Tree Field. And this is the Big Tree Story Archive, a collection of the voices and the stories of the people who've come through here.
Hello, this is Sylvie Morgan Brown, formerly Sylvie Morgan Flato, coming to you live from the main dining hall. And I am here to introduce the Big Tree Story Archive Project. To those who have no connection to Frost Valley, I just want to take a moment to apologize to you because these stories will go in one ear and out the other, and that's okay.
I am Dari Litchman. I am watching something that is giving me pure joy. It is called SWAT, formerly known as Geronimo. Can it hear me over all this noise? Formerly known as Geronimo, and it is a game being led by the one and only Alfil Rees. And I don't think there's anyone else that could lead it. And it is a really special game, and it's kind of hard to explain it, but it's a lot like, there's so many things involved. It's sort of like musical chairs without any music, with a lot of rules, and also something called a bopper. So this one time, I was playing Geronimo / SWAT at a reunion when my daughter was a baby. And I was trying to run. I was holding her, carrying her. She was a baby. And I was running to a chair, and I lost my balance. And I fell.
There was a plane wreck on Double Top Mountain, and I had a cabin full of kids, 9 kids. I was the village chief of Lenape. They were 12-year-old boys. And I never really did much camping before that. And we had heard that the Civil Air Patrol couldn't get up the mountain for whatever reason. And, of course, all the kids in my cabin wanted to go up the mountain and find the plane. So we didn't find it the first time, but the second time we went up Double Top, we found it.
When I was in Advil, we hiked Double Top, and so once we got to the plane, these kids were like searching through the remains of the airplane, and they found the pilot's headset, and then they hid it underneath like a sombrero that we brought up, and then they brought it all the way down, and then the counselors got very upset at them, and then they had to take it up the next morning.
The Brian Butler story is that I remember coming here. I remember him as a camper, and then because there was a lot of like alliterated camper names, remember? Like Brian Butler and Doug Doble And there's more, but I can't think of what they are. And then I remember coming back, and he was a staff member. And I was so impressed by him as a staff member. And I was really impressed with how I just was like, this guy gets it. He really understands what it means to be a counselor at Frost Valley. And so I wrote him an anonymous letter. And I filled a page. And I was just like, you have the spirit. You really totally get it. I have been watching you. I see you. You are what this place is about. And I anonymously put it in his mailbox or whatever. Put it somewhere where he would find it. Or I might have, maybe it wasn't anonymous, but I don't remember. But anyway, I gave it to him. And then I remember that he totally didn't. He didn't react to it. I wrote him this, I poured my heart out. And then he just didn't even acknowledge it. So
I moved up through the years with campers. I had some of the same campers in Forest, and then had them again in Lenape, and had them again in Pack. And in my Pack summer, the summer of '98, which was my last full summer, I was the VC of Pack Village, and was trying to make sure that these kids that I knew had been coming to camp for years and years had a chance to do activities that they hadn't yet been able to do at Frost Valleys. As you mature up and grow up, you get to rappel giant sledge or do the other, higher, well, it's called higher risk, but, not risky, just, more high adventure activities. And one that we had scheduled, people know it in lots of different names. It's part of the high adventure course, high ropes adventure. I know it as the Giant's Ladder. Some people know it as Jacob's Ladder. Some people know it just as the Giant Ladder, however it is. And the object of the obstacle is to two people have to climb this ladder. The ladder is 2x4s spread about 12 feet wide, and the two have to cooperate to climb the ladder, because the higher you go, the further and further apart the steps are, to the point where the bottom step is probably 4 feet from one to the next, and the top one is closer to 6 or 7 feet. So it's a truly cooperative experience. So all these Pack guys, all their testosterone going, they want to be the fastest or the quickest or the best to the top. They're all, talking trash with each other, and yet encouraging each other when anybody's on the obstacle itself. And that summer, I had one camper named Lee Chapman, who was part of the Chapman crew. I also had another camper named Miller. Now, Miller was on dialysis. He was one of our dialysis campers, which is one of the amazing things Frost Valley offers. And he had been a dialysis camper the whole of his life. So he was very physically underdeveloped. He was much smaller than the other kids. He wore braces on his legs. He was very bone delicate. It didn't change him from enjoying the Frost Valley experience in every possible way. And one of the things he wanted more than anything was to do this element. Now, we had to get the clearance from his dialysis nurses and doctors that he could, do this. And they said, well, he can try, but we don't, that I said, that's all he wants to do is he given the attempt and he can try it. And so we said, okay, but now who are we going to pair him up with? Who can he do this with? Usually you do this with somebody of your own physical size because there's a lot of pushing and pulling. Lee Chapman said, I'll do it with him. Now, Lee was physically considerably larger than Miller was. And, beefy, he's a 15-year-old kid and he's on the football team and everything else, So, big for his size. The two of them started this out, and Lee knew that he was going to have to do a lot of work to get Miller up this thing. He would have to climb up and then pull Miller up. And these things are getting higher and higher. Now, normally most of the kids together would do it in about from 10 to 20 minutes. Like, that was a good climb time. They were on for well over an hour. And Lee was doing everything he possibly could to make sure that Miller could get up there and, putting himself, climbing up and then dangling high and then pulling him up. It was something really, really, truly to see. Everybody on the ground is cheering and screaming for them to get higher and higher. And I said, you guys are doing great. You don't have to. And Lee looked down at me and said, we're going to the top. And all right, this is it. Yolande Philpotts and Mikia Eatman were on the belay for either one of them on either side, doing their best to help make sure they were supported going up the whole time. They made it to the top, Miller and Lee, and stood on the top step of the giant ladder. And the expression on Miller's face and the exhaustion on Lee's face was, for me, the pinnacle moment of being a counselor. Proud of them like my children. I actually ended up leaving right then and there because I was so overwhelmed emotionally. I went to the director's office, and it was Carole Paterson at the time. She was my director, and I sat down in her office and just started weeping. Just couldn't stop crying. But the best possible tears of joy, knowing that these two had given to each other the Frost Valley experience of accomplishment, and nothing is impossible. And I want to thank everybody that had that moment, that gave that moment to me as a counselor.
It was a very interesting summer. I remember a lot of the number 23, the number infinity, and there was no cabin 8. It disappeared. No black hole that year. And we came out the other end. And one of the best memories I have from that summer was a counselor hunt, where you left a cabin with a bicycle helmet wrapped in toilet paper in a bathroom robe and scaled 80 feet up a tree with chopsticks to get caught in counselor hunt.
Are you making this up?
No, it was down by like a biscuit.
Like teeny hops?
Okay.
One of my fondest memories. And you would always get dressed up for the counselor hunt.
Right, just so I'm harder to find, I guess.
Yeah.
The toilet paper and the bicycle helmet.
It was just a one-off. That was just fun.
One of the things that I remember about you in particular was there was a challenge night activity, and our cabin won for best gymnastics presentation. Do you remember what we did?
I don't off the top of my head. What did we do that time?
So what Lee and his 7 bunkmates were able to pull off wasn't just a miracle of choreography and gymnastics prowess. You really brought your A game as 11-year-old boys. And so what I asked you to do was to privately, independently think of the worst possible gymnastics fail that you could pull off.
Oh, yes.
But that you channel, because there was like a big wrestling mat they put out.
Yes.
And you only had like 30 seconds, so all 7 had to go at pretty much the same time, rapid fire. And she just like ran across the span of the stage or the front of the room. This would have been happening at the Geyer Hall. You ran across, and then it had to look like you really had an accident and that you were truly injured. And I feel like each one of you, especially you were like, okay, I can't do gymnastics, but I can make it look like I just got hurt.
Yes. I believe we ran in our finest gymnastics about to twirl mode, and then all fell out on our faces.
But the secret power that you had was the ability to, in the beginning, sort of concentrate and make it appear that you were like a serious gymnast and you were about to do something. And so the whole room was like, oh, wait, I didn't know. Does Lee do gymnastics? Oh, yeah, no, he does. Yeah, watch.
A little Vince Vaughn, channeling energy.
That's one of my fondest memories. I was never more proud of you and those other boys and then you won too, because I think they felt sorry because
because we had our game faces on. We went to win.
Well, then you lost your game face when you got injured.
Yes.
Injured. No one was actually hurt in the making of it, but the audience believed that you were hurt.
Yes, they did. I don't think we could talk anymore about that, unfortunately, due to a licensing agreement.
It was the summer of 1997. I was working late into the evening as the waterfront director, and my car was parked down by the waterfront. And I went down, got into my car, started it, turned on the lights, which illuminated a group of individuals that were in the process of moving all of the canoes and rowboats from the boating section into the swimming section. They called themselves the Free Fall Lizards. That group included Mr. Jeff Daly, Sean Schaefer, and James Raffo, and I think another fellow with the name of Alex. But it was quite the crew. I have a photo, and I think I remember that Jeff Daly's hair was orange at the point. Needless to say, I wasn't sure what to do, so I let them continue with their shenanigans, and I went home. But I did take a picture before I left, so I have the picture, and it's one of my favorite memories from summer and from camp.
In 1995, I was a counselor in Pack Village with Malik Jenkins and Ralph Heath and Richie Eddings, and we went on a quest that summer to save the carrots. It was actually it was the last track of Tool's first album. Had this I don't even know the name of the song, but it had this like 13 minutes of rambling, but on it kept talking about like saving the carrots, and they had a consciousness, and damn the rabbits, let them wear glasses. And I don't know, I think we had some like two cool kids, I think, as 15-year-old teenagers, and we just decided to kind of embrace this insanity of that we as Pack Village would no longer eat carrots, and we'd actively try and save them. I didn't realize how many carrots were slaughtered every day here at Frost Valley. As there was shredded carrots in the salad bar, and carrots were always seemed to be served. And, as soon as we actually seemed to identify that this was going to be a movement, and this, it became a religion in some capacities. There was a lot of crazy calling back and forth and sermons given, and it was a wonderful counseling technique from a transition from one activity to the next and keep them focused and actually just keep them preaching about carrots. And so as that happened, there were many, many other villages that would take the opposite stance of our religion and try to eat carrots. And there was one day, it might have been like fourth session, and we were doing a theme where it was like some sort of like medieval theme where every age group village was given a role. So, like, I remember Lenape were like the kings, and queens, and we were given the role in Pack Village as friars. And I don't know how, and I give credit to Malik for this, because I don't know how we got all of these supplies gathered in a short period of time, but we were able to dress everybody up in Pack Village up in bed sheets that we cut holes over, put our heads through them, and we got carrots from the dining hall. And these, to this day, they're the largest carrots I've ever seen in my life. They were like the size of everybody's chest, and we drilled holes through them and made necklaces and wore them around. We made huge banners with carrots with a cross through it, and rabbits wearing glasses. And when we walked from place to place, we walked in single file chanting about saving the carrots and doing our religious mantra that we had been practicing all summer. And we ended up in the dining hall one day at lunch, and we're sitting down, and all of the dining hall, as we're eating, everyone's in their garbs and in their roles. And Hemlock Village, at the time, they were the knights. So they were overloaded with tinfoil and cardboard and, 50 some odd kids. And they're all ready to rock and roll. And we're all eating lunch. And all of a sudden you start hearing across the dining hall, eat the carrots, eat the carrots, eat the carrots, eat the carrots. And everybody, well, I was not the VC, I was the spiritual leader of this religion, and everybody in the village looked at me, and I remember looking at Malik, and he kind of shook my head like, don't do anything. And I said, all right, and I calmed everybody down, and then sure enough, a couple minutes later, eat the carrots, eat the carrots, and the dining hall got louder and louder and louder, and Ralph Heath slammed his fist down on the table, and he yelled, "Brother Jeffrey, we must do something!" And I looked at Malik, and he had his head down on the table, shaking his head like he's lost the plot at this point. He's no longer in charge. And so I got up, and I kind of started to do our religion. And on there we had things that had nothing to do with carrots in this religion, where I would be like, can I get an amen? And everybody would be amen. And then we would yell can I get a brontosaurus, baby brontosaurus? This day I have no idea why we said that, but it was just kind of became a call sign. So the kids were in uniform with their white robes, carrots dangling, signs going, all in a straight line. And Hemlock, which was on the other end of the dining hall, starts getting louder and louder. And I didn't really know what to do, but no one had ever backed down they didn't back down. So we just decided we were going to continue to do the march. So we started to march through the tables in the dining hall to the other side, and we got right to the edge of Hemlock Village. And all of our guys were this shield of white sheets and carrots, an army of 15-year-olds facing, triple the number of 12-year-olds who were with their tinfoil and cardboard, all armor, and they're yelling, eat the carrots, eat the carrots. And they weren't stopping, and we weren't stopping, and I didn't quite know what to do, so I gave the order to continue to walk into the village, into the row of tables. We were no longer on the outside, so we were right in the thick of the middle, which turned out to be a real tactical disaster, as you're about to find out. And as we're in there, and the kids are screaming, eat the carrots, and we're doing our chants, this 12-year-old boy kind of reaches up from his seat right next to this 15-year-old and grabs the carrot that's hanging from his neck and bites it. And I'm telling you, the entire dining hall went silent, and you could hear the, and the look that happened, at that point in time is I realized, we are now surrounded by all of these 12-year-olds who now all have the idea, and I could see it. I could see the light bulbs in everyone's heads of, we can start to eat these carrots. And these kids rise up, and they start, consuming us whole, eating carrots, and it turned into, a complete disaster, and it was all sorts of turned into, it was the food fight that never really involved food being thrown in the dining hall. And at the end, it was funny. We had a whole big discussion about how some religions are persecuted, and we have to kind of continue the faith and move on, and not, resort to crazy antics of just revenge and all sorts of things that were there, and it kind of went on, and that was sort of the climax of a full 8 weeks of no carrots at camp, and that was our religion that summer.
I have a sad story about you, and it was one of those moments where it's not a happy camp moment, the car moment.
Oh yeah, tell that story.
Really? Yeah, I think it's one of those moments where you realize Frost Valley is filled with normal people, and that bad, horrible things can happen here, just like they can happen everywhere else. And it didn't. I mean, I don't want to go into the story. Maybe you'll get somebody else to tell the story part. But it made me sad. Made me sad about camp.
Would you at least tell the short version?
The short version is that you had this beautiful art piece that was your car. I think, was it a Volkswagen or Jetta?
Volvo.
A Volvo? It was a Volvo, and it was a beautiful 80s, early 90s, Volvo. It was an old-fashioned one, coveted if it was plain, but you had painted it and molded things onto it. It was an art piece. It was the equivalent of what you would see at a Burning Man car now. It was the only thing I compared it to. Clearly lots of love and work went into it, and I mean, it was movable art. And I don't remember what the catalyst was, but you were doing some kind of prank thing with the maintenance crew. Is that correct? Am I still on the right? Yeah. And it was fine. It was just all fun and games and silly. And then one day you came back and your car was brown.
Which was the original color.
Right. Which, but it was just so insulting and so deep and so thoughtless and cruel, I thought. Yeah. And I don't think that camp handled it with the level of seriousness that it required.
Right.
and it made me sad because then you start to, like, once there's a little crack in the sheen, you start to see other cracks.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the sheen is still there, but it's just more realistic view of where we are.
Right.
The people here are still the people in society.
Right.
Yeah.
And the prank that was happening was that I was assigned to cabin 8 all summer.
Oh, infinity, that's right.
And I rotated it to an infinity symbol.
Which was kind of genius.
And then they kept restoring it 90 degrees. And I just kept like adding more nails and more screws. And they were like, hey, we're the maintenance department. We have lots of nails. We will out-nail you and out-screw you. And then they ultimately out-screwed me.
And did anyone ever sit you down and say, Dave, you really need to stop doing this. This is against the rules? No. So it was fun.
No, I think the maintenance department was definitely taking their own authority that was not allowed.
Right, but your boss, per se, never sat you down and said, you actually have to stop this.
No, it went further. Like by the third session, the cabin list actually said cabin infinity.
Wow.
So it became like...
It was part of the lore of the camp.
Even in that summer. I wanted to tell another story, but it would be good to tell it with you here because you can... was the word corroborate?
I think that is a word.
Is that a word?
It is a word. I don't know if it's the word until we go into the moment, and then we know we're using the right word.
It's just like when I say that word, it sounds like I can't be pronouncing that word right. Corroborate?
I can't say it out loud now because I'll say it wrong.
Well,
I'm not even,
I don't know if there's another word.
I can't
substantiate?
say it. Yeah.
You'll be able to tell if
I can co-sign whatever you're saying.
You can say if this story is true.
Right. Co-sign was good. I think I used like urban lingo just now.
So this wasn't a story until a few months ago.
Okay.
When you played a small but significant role. I remember coming to camp at a certain point and going and realizing that I was a different person at camp than I was at home.
Interesting. I haven't seen you very much not at camp, but I do remember Base Dave.
Right. And so the person that I was at home, it would be generous to say that I was a loser.
Huh.
Like I was a nerd, I was not coordinated, and I certainly was not socially relaxed.
Right.
But at camp, I came alive and was just like fun and a clown and silly. And I think I realized eventually was that was just me.
Right.
It wasn't that I was a different person. That was the real me, and at home I was not me.
Fun fact, same.
You were different at camp than you were at home.
Especially in my younger years, I think I was way more comfortable to be my quirky self here and not live within the restrictions. And then I'd go home and have to like go into whatever social norms for me. That was being a black kid in a town that was diverse, but I lived on the white side of town. Like, so there were all these weird things. But at camp, I could be whoever. And then when I was a teenager, that changed. But definitely in my younger years, I felt more in touch with myself and my body here.
So the story goes to the fourth session during a particular herd stock, and you're going to know immediately what I'm talking about, which is that it was at a herd stock that I had a conversation with someone else at camp who sang a song. And I said to her after she came off the stage, you can do that.
Oh, is this Lauren?
Yes.
That was the summer I brought Lauren to camp, which is funny because we were just talking about why you shouldn't bring your friends from home to camp. And I made that mistake.
That's a whole other story because I've also thought, oh, you should come to my camp.
Yes. I did that thing to my daughter this summer, and she came home and she was like, I had fun, but my friends and I didn't really play together.
Right.
That's right. Camp is not for you to extend your home life. It's for you to have your own life.
Exactly. Yes. Totally. So where this all connects is that she gets off the stage, having knocked everyone out.
I was very jealous. I remember being very jealous. How dare she come to my camp and knock everyone out? This is my camp.
But what the person who I had known up until that point was just ordinary person.
Yeah.
And I think she was enjoying
the shock.
Maybe the shock, but also enjoying being an ordinary person.
Because at home, she was the person. She wasn't famous by any chance yet. And we're talking about Lauryn Hill. I don't know if we said her name. She was just famous because she had this extreme talent. Right. And in middle school, that talent was starting to show. I think she came to Frost Valley right before she did Showtime at the Apollo. And so it was really before she broke out. But she was getting all the hype that comes from being local famous. Before the internet, local famous was really just local famous.
So Lauren and I were in two very different places where I was coming to camp and becoming like a star at camp, where I was the opposite at home.
Interesting take, yeah.
Lauren, who was a star in training
Right.
and was put in the spotlight at home, I think enjoyed just going to camp and being an ordinary girl with no skills but then at Herdstock sang that song.
And probably got up on the stage in a totally different mindset. And pause, because this is interesting that you're making me think of it this way, because I was all in my head about that moment. But for her, it was probably a moment where she was feeling really confident and comfortable because she had that camp feel and was willing to share this thing with you guys that was tricky for her at home. But here it was like, oh, I can show you myself.
Right. Her parents wouldn't have been around. No one was pressuring her to play a song. I remember her coming off the stage and saying to her, I didn't know you could do that. And she said, yeah, I'm kind of a different person at camp. You probably are too. And that's when I said, yeah, back at home, I'm kind of a loser. And she thought that was hilarious.
Really?
Because at camp, I was just kind of like the king of camp and like funny.
She clocked that probably pretty easily. Lauren's very, very smart. In addition to being musically talented, you drop knowledge, she picks it up.
But that began me thinking, okay, at summer camp, I'm a different person. And here's another person who is being a different person at summer camp. And like, you can be whoever you need to be.
Whoever you need to be. It's not even so much a different person, but it's more like a reset. And you kind of learn more about who you are because all those pressures outside aren't there, right? So it's not so much a different person, it's more an authentic person because you don't feel the pressures of whatever is pressuring you in your life. Your family, your world, your surroundings, all that anxiety kind of disappears when you're here. And it's like a reset. Someone like gives you a pass card.
Right. Another part of the story is that, and this is where a few months ago when you told me that was Lauryn Hill, it sort of changed something because in that moment...
Oh, you didn't know in that moment, you didn't know until recently that was actually a famous person.
If I had told you the story a year ago, I would have said there was this girl at camp named Lauren. I have no idea what her last name was because you don't know anyone's last name at camp.
No.
And the only part of the story that I would have remembered, and it's not much of a story, was that was when I first said to someone, yeah, I'm not like this guy at home.
Right.
And she said, yeah, I have been sort of hiding a part of myself here at camp. But for her, it was being maybe more shy or being a little less out of the spotlight.
Yeah, I think so.
Whereas for me, the spotlight was the contradiction.
What percentage of people that come to camp do you think that's true for? Because I think it's a pretty high percentage.
I can't imagine it's not. Like, everyone experiences it. I don't think anyone's like looking for a bad experience, but I think the people who have the best experiences are the people who got here and realized they could be a human being.
And breathe a little easier or deeper.
A few months ago, I'm on the phone with you, and I didn't believe Malik.
Oh, that's why you called me.
Yeah, you were like, yeah, David, that was Lauryn Hill. And I went, oh, God, this like piece of my memory now has this like famous person attached to it who I have like all her albums. Yeah. I've listened to every song 1,000 times. And I was like, wait, I interacted with Lauryn Hill? And not only that, had a conversation about this fundamental piece of my being.
Yeah.
Jenna Ostrow must have gone somewhere on a holdover weekend where she was doing laundry with Jon Turer and came back and reported to us what we thought was hilarious, that Jon owned 12 pairs of Hanes tighty-whities with the red and gray stripe on the elastic, exactly the same. And I don't know why, we just thought that was really funny. Just maybe women don't have 12 pairs of the same underwear. And I don't know, we just thought we needed to do something about it.
I loved pranks. And my favorite example of a prank was this was just so perfect. Is I was walking down, we were all walking down to the flagpole for flag raising, and on the top of the flagpole were a string of Hanes tighty-whitey underwear that had all been tie-dyed. It seemed pretty apparent that they had been tie-dyed as part of this prank. And I said to my co-counselor, who I'm imagining, because I forget a lot, I'm imagining was Alex Warno, because he was my favorite co-counselor. I said to him, Alex, the only problem with this prank, because it's perfect, except for the fact that we don't know whose underwear it is, which then was quickly resolved a few minutes later by me discovering that it was actually my underwear.
I guess this past summer, we were having an overnight. First, we got lost and we were told the wrong directions, so that sucked. And then when we got there, everyone was kind of bummed out because we were hiking for a long time. And then it starts raining, and the VC is running through the rain to figure out if we're on the lightning watch or what we should do. She runs through the rain. She's everybody run to the bathroom house now. So we don't take any of your stuff. So we, without any of our stuff, we run to this bathroom house. And the whole entire village is stuck in this tiny little bathroom house, and we look at the toilets, and it's a compostable toilet called a clivus, and everybody starts starting this clivus cult, and they start chanting about the clivus, and turns out there's this clivus gnome. And then everybody makes up the story about the clivus gnome, how he snatches people from the toilet. And he lives in the clivus, and it becomes this whole thing. And then we have to walk all the way back to our cabins after that when we're done with lightning watch in the rain. But the clivus cult lives on.
Yeah, I think one of the stories that I remember vividly and fondly was, one of the things that attracted me to Frost Valley was the diversity of people that it serves. And I remember having a conversation early on with a board member, and he said, "What is your vision for Frost Valley?" And I said, "Well, I think it's to continue to build a camp where any child can attend regardless of their ability or their financial situation or anything. Just anybody can come to Frost Valley." And so I was reminded, I think, of the importance of that maybe 5 or 6 years into my tenure here, where we had a young man who came from the Albany area in the dialysis program. And he came down, he didn't want to be here. He was 14 or 15 years old. He just didn't want to be here. So the first day he was on dialysis, I went and visited him, and we just chatted for a while. And of course he's confined to the chair and can't leave, so I have a chance to kind of chat with him a bit. And we talked about getting used to being in a different place and making new friends. And he just was a video game guy. He played video games. That's what he did. He had a couple of friends, but they were mostly, online friends. And he used a walker. That was the other thing with this young guy. So he wasn't able to move around quite as well, even though he mainstreamed into a cabin group. And so the second time he was on dialysis, this would have been on Wednesday, I went back up to see him and I asked him how things were going. He said, "Yeah, pretty good. He said, I'm making some friends." And he said, "This place isn't so bad." And I said, "Yeah, it's not so bad, So let's give it a couple more days and we'll talk again on Friday." So on Friday I came back up and talked with him. And you could just see his spirit growing, in those 5 days. You could just feel it. And so I asked him how it was going. "Great." He said, "I taught my cabin how to play rock, paper, scissors. That's all they want to do now is play rock, paper, scissors, And he felt so good because he had something to offer them. And they loved it, and they embraced him, and they would play rock, paper, scissors, and it was good. So the following week, I guess on Monday, I just popped in and asked him how he was going, and big smile on his face. "This is great. It's fine." So I quit visiting him then after that. So on Friday, the closing breakfast, I was in the dining hall and saw him walking, carrying a tray of dishes. He was the waiter for the table. No walker. He was walking, carrying this tray of dishes. 10 days before that, he could hardly stand up straight, and he would move around with this walker. But in 10 days, he went from abandoning the walker to walking and actually carrying a heavy tray of plates and bowls. And so I didn't even say anything to him. I just smiled. He smiled at me, and I don't think any words had to be exchanged. But it was a beautiful story, and I was just proud to be a part of that.
So I signed on to do a CIT summer, not because I wanted to be a counselor, but because I wanted to go on the backpacking trip. And I got here, I got to the tent, went to unload my stuff, and Brian Butler saw me, who I've never met before in my whole life. And he goes, "You're going to be a CIT?" And I said, "Yes." And the next thing I knew, I was like completely surrounded by this large jumping crowd hugging me like they've known me for my entire life. And at that point I said, "Ooh, I guess I do really like Frost Valley. I don't need to go on out trips. I want to stay in camp for the rest of my life." The end.
I was a camper still before I graduated to staff, and we were helping rewire the horse field in Castle Field. And we had been doing that work all day until dusk happened. And I needed to have a pee, and there's no bathroom nearby. So I just turned and went to the edge of the forest and decided to relieve myself, not realizing that they had already turned on the electric fence.
Did that really happen?
Castle Field.
And you got hurt?
No, just zapped. It sends a pulse every 10 seconds.
Who's telling the story?
Me.
Oh, great. Go ahead.
Mommy's gonna help me.
Oh, great. This is going to be a duet.
Okay. Mom, you get to base off the story. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
We're going to have to come back.
You sure? Well, what if we do a rehearsal?
Okay,
and then
let's
we'll record
rehearse.
it.
So what is one thing that when somebody says to you Frost Valley that you think of?
The YMCA tower.
Oh, climbing on the YMCA. Okay, climbing on the YMCA tower. Okay, and we all would go there as a family. And my father, who is no longer with us, but was the one who helped bring us here in the first place. He was sitting on the log bench with all of our family as the kids were doing the climbing, but his knees were bothering him a lot. And he started walking around with a little stick, right? And what happened? What happened?
He started saying, "Oh, my knees."
Oh, my knees. Oh, my knees. And my son, Jackson, then got his little cane of a stick, his walking stick, and started imitating Grandpa. And everybody was rolling around with laughter, just remembering Jackson walking around like Grandpa. And so sometimes when we get up to that little Y tower, we think of him. And Jackson does the impersonation, so does Stella, so does pretty much everybody.
Stella, could you tell us what your grandpa sounds like?
I don't really remember. I was 3 when I was with him. So I don't really remember what he sounds like. So my brother imitates my grandpa in a very dark voice.
Okay. Let's hear your dark voice.
Oh, my knees. It's like a country voice when you say it. I've been coming to Frost Valley for 8 years.
One of my favorite things about Big Tree Field was at Hangout when all the counselors came around and the kids got to run around and do whatever they wanted to do, and the counselors got to catch up with their day. It's a little downtown. You can enjoy the view. All the kids were safe. All the counselors were happy. For 45 minutes before we ate again, there was madness, there was sorrow, and there was happiness. And Big Tree will always be in my life. You got to hug it. You got to hug Big Tree. I love Big Tree.
It's called the Big Tree Story Archive.
So that's right. That's
trust you.
The Big Tree. My name's Robbie Sherman. The Big Tree means so much to me. It's where we would all meet after incredible edible snacks and archery and ultimate sickle ball. We would play all the time. Frost Valley means the world to me.
Thanks, Robbie. Will you talk a little bit about the song you wrote, Stars in the Sky?
Yeah, well, I was inspired by nighttime at Frost Valley, and I saw some stars. My favorite star is Alpha Centauri Prime, and I love the Big Dipper. It's always nice. It's nice to come leave the city and see the Big Dipper.
Did you, did you ever feel like it limited your relationship to Frost Valley Corporation?
We are at odds. I'm at odds with the Frost Valley Corporation, but in the best possible way. We respect each other.
Are you still a brand leader?
Off-brand. I'm an off-brand leader. They go one way. They zig while I zag about Frost Valley. I have a couple of different. We have differing opinions, but we mutually respect each other.
And what's next for Robbie Sherman?
Robbie Sherman's just going to live on in infamy. Frost Valley by injection. That's how I describe myself. And we're going to continue traditions.
I felt at the age of 25, I was a little bit too young to become the camp director. I wanted a job that had sleep connected to it. Sleep and no problems. Mammals, I had decided, human and otherwise, give problems.
Wait, before you go, just as a follow-up, because I think listeners would be wondering this, what's an example of a job where you sleep and you don't have problems?
I don't know what kind of job has sleep and no problems connected to it, but that's the job I've always been looking for.
You can't hear this. Go. I'll be in 2 minutes. I would say, usually camp stories involved in something really bad, unfortunately. And I remember my worst influence and best influence at camp was Brian Butler. Pack day out. We go to Devil's Tombstone, and we're driving home in the vans. I have one van, Brian has the other, and we're on Frost Valley Road, and we kind of lost where we were, and Brian decided to suddenly slow down to 50 miles per hour in front and make me real slow. And I'm getting fed up, and as a young, dumb 20-year-old, I thought it'd be a good idea to pull out and try and overtake him. And when I did, his, he put the pedal to the metal. So you've got two Frost Valley vans roaring down Frost Valley Road. Full of kids. Oh, yeah. Neck and neck. And it gets worse because we didn't realize where we were. And at that moment I look, and we were passing Reflection Pond where they were putting up the tent for the board meeting. And as I look, I just see Holby Brown with his head in his hands as we roared past at 60 miles per hour, neck and neck, like we're in a speedway. And we got back to camp, and we just started to pack. And we never heard another thing. I don't know if Holby asked who was driving the vans, and somebody covered for us, but I never heard another thing.
And it was a very rainy day, so rainy that there were huge puddles. The streams were overflowing, and we were all given rations of food. And we had to sit in our own tents, but we were pretty close by each other because it was pouring and it couldn't spread us out more. Right. And I remember sneaking over to your tent in the pouring rain and unzipping your tent. Yeah. And you were floating on your thermarest with a pot on your head. Yeah. And you were like a dervish. I think now, having seen dervish ceremonies, right, you had this wild abandonment in your eyes, and you were playing the pots. You had a series of pots, yes, that you were playing, as drums. As drums. Yeah. And you had so much there was so much happiness in your eyes and in your face, yeah, in the middle of an otherwise for a lot of people what would have been a really terrible circumstance, to be wet and right, your sleeping bag wet. And rain coming in the seams.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would add to the story, just to help listeners set that image a little bit, is that where I had chosen to set my tent was a dry creek bed. That's right. And so it had now rained, and so there wasn't a a veneer of water on the floor of the tent. It was like moving water. It was a nature scene. It was like one of those white noise machines. We're talking about 4 to 5 inches of water. And so 4 to 5 inches of water was moving through the porous tent. And the reason why that was happening was that before you got there, the tent was acting like a dam. And there was like a foot of water up against the tent, so I just unzipped it because it was actually better to let it through. And then I stayed on the pad. And when you opened your side, the other side, it was like, you just saw this like, I had everything except a boat. I was the boat. Will you just go back and just whatever you can recall from crossing this mountain behind us that year?
Well, we were on the CIT trip, and I remember that a big part of the CIT trip was the final. You remember it as 10 days or 12 days? I guess it would have been 10. If it's 14, we would have had 2 on either side, probably. Right. That would make sense.
It was at least 10 days.
At least 10 days. And I remember that we had camped the night before, and it was part of our solo. And our job was to basically find our way without a trail over Wildcat, which is the one behind us here.
Just to clarify, it was our group solo.
Our group solo.
So there was maybe a dozen of us.
Right.
And we were now without any adult supervision.
Without any adults.
It was supposed to be for just about 12 hours, but it turned into, I think, 48 because our leaders, maybe you could tell that part. So we had to get from Wittenberg.
That's right. And normally in this day and age, the leaders would have been, if they gave you a solo at all, they'd be right around the corner. Right. Or they'd have to be very close by. But in this case, you're right. We were on Wittenberg, and they said, we're going to leave now. And you all are now responsible for finding your way not only over Wildcat, but down off of this mountain into the saddle and then figure out. And so I'll be interested to hear what you remember. The memory that I have is the most clear memory are bushwhacking up, using the compass and the map to the best of our ability, and then we hit what felt like a pretty sheer rock, like a ledge. And there was I remember like walking down the ledge to figure out, is there any way for us to get around this? Right. And you and I kind of scouted it out as the de facto leaders in that moment, and then realized that the only way we were going to do it is to go up and over this ledge, that we were just going to have to figure out how to do it. And it was dicey. It must have been somewhat dicey because it was at least 20-foot or 25-foot falls off of the ledge.
Yeah.
And we had heavy packs.
Right.
That we had to. Did we pass them up? Did we wear them? We passed them up.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
But wait, will you just fill in that blank? Because will you just say why our leaders abandoned us?
Well, one of them had been a pig dentist. I think is a part of why his credentials were a little questionable. The other one had said some things that I think really were jarring to the ears of young people.
Mostly to the girls.
And I think we pretty much ran amok. I mean, we just did what we wanted, and we were really dialed into having as much fun and as much laughter as humanly possible. And I'm not quite sure how that resonated for them. I don't know that they really necessarily got it or appreciated it. And I think we probably also encouraged it. I can't imagine we would have been disappointed when they were leaving early. Right. Do you think
scared.
Or scared. Right. No, I think we were relieved.
The trip got much better.
What do you remember?
Well,
what do you remember about them?
Well, I think the thing that the biggest part of the setup was that they did hire some people to be the CIT directors that summer who had no history at Frost Valley. So they didn't realize that some of the people on our group had grown up together, were very close, and were willing to coordinate in horrific ways. And so we were like, I remember when they were splitting us up, Sue Applebaum turning to me, and her first response was, they don't know. Like, they don't know what they just did. But they just put all of the friends sort of in that, like the troublemakers, like the worst campers that you could possibly put together. Like the right thing to have done would be to split you and me up the right thing to have done would have been to split Sue and not put Sue with us. Do you want to say anything about the movie Back to the Future or the bus?
I'm going to let you keep your damn hands off her, Biff. I remember we had to work on that scene at least for 20 takes to get it right. And you were a real perfectionist. You were a stickler for the details.
It's true.
But you got the best out of us as a result, and I really appreciate it. I think the final take, we really nailed it. It was worthy of the screen, although there was no film there to capture it. Right, that's right. That's right. Again.
I know. We had to get the tone.
And as far as the bus down, it was Biscuit Brook.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the first nights. I think that kind of set the tempo for things early on, is my memory. It has upset them immensely, but I remember it being incredibly funny, and I remember feeling like we were onto something really good that we could lean in deep in the next 10 days and create something pretty special. Yeah. That's all I remember about the whole trip. It's like those three. I have 3 or 4 moments, and the last one is coming back into Sawmill with his sawmill, right. And seeing, and we were rough. I mean, we were dirty, and we had worked hard to get over, and we finally got there.
All right, bring him back, bring him back. Good job. All right, that's good. I'm not moving around too much, so.
Well,
are we going?
The origin of the game.
Okay, there are 3 or 4 different origin pieces to Ultimate Sicko Ball. The first goes way back to when I was a camper and played a crazy game when I was in Lenape as a camper, which used to be the oldest village, of Capture the Flag on Banks Hill, which is etched in my memory, and it's probably more, but like, I remember Todd Watson, like, in a rain. I may be confusing different memories, but there were people who were like in trees jumping down on people in this game of Capture the Flag on Banks Hill, and Banks Hill is on a slant, so people would come tumbling down these things. Etched in my memory is the most epic thing ever. So that's one bit start to the origin of this, because the summer that I was VC, oh no, she's with us. The summer that I was VC of Lenape in 1992, there were 2 other things going on. One, there was an epic cheer contest between Hemlock and Lenape. Lenape had long been the most vociferous cheerers in the dining hall. I had forever been a Hemlock counselor, and we had always been out-cheered by Lenape. And the year that, in 1992, I inadvertently became VC of Lenape, having never been a counselor in Lenape. And the one saving grace of this was that I knew we were going to have the best cheers. Right. But then, and after years of being out cheered by Lenape, I would be able to be with the loud cheerers. But that was the same summer that my later-to-be wife, Ellie Gordon, and her colleagues in Saki and Hemlock invented the Knights of Hemlock cheer, or the Knights and Maidens and something. Anyway, it was a double cheer for both Hemlock and Saki, and it brought the roof down. And it was incredible, and it just energized them. And somehow, Hemlock and Saki became... Hemlock and Saki... All right, he's in jail? Oh, no! Oh, no! Are you on our team? You're not. No!
10 seconds in the circle.
Get her! All right, good job. Ball back.
I'm in this.
No, you're in jail.
No, I had 10 seconds. You're in here with me.
And so there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around Hemlock and Lenape cheering. And a couple of the staff members got very excited and enthusiastic about it. And we, being in our problem-solving leadership mode, we thought the way to try to diffuse the tension a little bit was to have the 2 staff members who were most energetic about this cheering competition between Hemlock and Lenape to work together on planning an activity. So we had an all-camp activity. I forget what session it was. And it was supposed to be all camp, but it ended up being that the girls' villages decided to do a newspaper fashion show together. And that left the boys' villages alone to figure out something to do. So these three things all came together, and I said to Darcy and John, who are the two sort of representatives of Hemlock and Lenape, we're going to play Capture the Flag on Banks Hill. This is like this epic memory from my childhood. We're going to reenact this, but we're going to do it with the whole camp. And they went up there to scout it out. I said, go check it out. And we wanted them to like go work together and do something together where they had some time alone with each other to sort of diffuse tensions. And they came back and they did find something to agree upon, which was that I was nuts. And this was a terrible idea. And that while it may have flown in the 80s, this was not a kind of 90s sort of thing that was going to happen with this many people running around Banks Hill playing Capture the Flag. So somehow at that point it segued into, all right, if we can't play on Banks Hill, what would be a safer place we could play? Well, how could we play it on Big Tree Field? And so we originally envisioned a giant game of Capture the Flag on Big Tree Field. But so much of Capture the Flag is finding the flag, finding the jails. It was like, how is that going to work in terms of, how could that possibly work when you could see everything? And gradually it evolved in this idea of what if we had more teams and more flags, essentially. So the balls became the flags, and we got this kind of crazy idea to try to have multiple teams, multiple sets of flags, all teams grabbing from each other. And we arrived on what became Ultimate Sicko Ball. I don't remember the details of how we came up with the various and sundry rules. I remember there was planning back and forth. John and Darcy were doing stuff. They'd come talk to me about it. Right. But we eventually decided to launch it. No idea that it would still be around all these years later. Zero. We would have come up with a better name if we had done that. And I don't remember how we actually came up with a name. I think we were looking for something that would get, we had the schedules. You write on the schedule. So you wanted something like jazzy on the schedule. Right. And so we had it. And so the very first time we played, it was just the boys' villages in the herd. So it was Pack, Hemlock, and Lenape. But the funny thing that happened was while we were playing this on Big Tree Field, the counselors from the girls' villages who were doing the newspaper fashion show all sort of started drifting over to see what was going on. And after one time of doing it as just a boys' event, they were like, no, we got to do this as a whole camp event. So the next time we did it as all camp. And that's the story of the origin. And I guess it was such a hit that people, kept playing it. And then it was this huge surprise to me when my kids started going to camp, 15 years later. They came home and were talking about this game that they loved playing called USB. Right. And I was like, USB? And they described it to me. And I was like, oh, that's Ultimate Sicko Ball. They're like, yeah, USB. Right. So my kids played growing up. And then in a sort of fun twist this summer, my son, who is an AIT, which is what used to be called this is a specialized CIT program for the Adventure Village, and John's son, Henry, who was a counselor here in Eagle this summer, when they played the all camp Ultimate Sicko, Maddie and Henry were the ones who kicked it off. So
passing the torch. So it was 92 to 2022. So it was 30 years later. Wow. They introduced the game, so it became a second generation of Frost Valley counselors and CITs leading off the thing.
This episode featured Sylvie Morgan Brown, Dari Litchman, Bud Cox, Hadley Lewis, Brian Butler, Lee Chapman, Carole Paterson, Jeff Daly, Mikia Eatman, Linea Glick, Jon Turer, Love Dahan, Jerry Huncosky, Heather Graff Noon, Caroline Koenig McCallum, Stella McCallum, Malik Jenkins, Robbie Sherman, as played by Jonathon Dahan, Peggy Rub, Matt Buczek, Alex Papouchis, Josh Tucker, and me, David Scherer Water. Special thanks to Frost Valley and the Olympia Radio Company for hosting the show.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
16 between 10 and 20.
Right. That kid grew up too fast.
Too fast. Isn't that what
Sorry,
happens?
they always say that.
I like what you did there.
We did that, but I think we mixed the 10 and the 16 verse.
We can.
I was thinking. What is that?
Coyote?
Seriously?
Let's head towards it.
Says he with a glow stick.
Oh, those are people.
People being
Those are people.
Wait, the environment.
I don't think those are people.
Those are fucking people.
I've heard them many times.
Those are definitely not people.
Yeah, those are definitely not people.
Like, people could not sustain that.
That's awesome.
So what the fuck was that?
Those were like dogs or coyotes.
All right, sing a song.
Okay, move on.
I like where your head's at.
Yeah, like 8 people just died, and we're just gonna go on with
I
another
like to
song.
sing about it. It's cool. Songs are melancholy. Make me